Hi guys and welcome to my review of chapter 125 of Boku no Hero Academia, and oh boy, this chapter was definitely not what I expected it to be. But before I get into that, just like an announcement, because you might realize that this is like 24 hours late. Basically what's going on is that I have started a new term at my university, and very unfortunately I have very late classes on Thursdays and also morning classes on Fridays, which you can already see is like really bad for my time schedule. So basically when I have these time hours, because apparently it's only every other Thursday that I have these late classes, I probably won't be able to do all of my videos on Thursdays because it gets really late, and I would love to sleep before I go to class the other day. So what I'm basically going to do is that I'm going to have One Piece and the first chapter of whatever comes out on Thursdays, and then I'll have the two others on Fridays. This time it happened to be Boku no Hero Academia I took today because I had to do live reaction of Shokugeki no Soma yesterday and I already had the setup, so that worked out for me, but it might change whether I do Shokugeki no Soma or Boku no Hero Academia on Fridays, but it'll be One Piece on Thursdays and Haikyuu on Fridays, no matter what. But of course, as I said, it's only every other Thursday that this happens, so yeah. Also, if One Piece happens to be on break, which happens every so often, I will probably do all the remaining series on Thursdays because they don't take up nearly as much time as my One Piece videos because I have to put so much work into those. So yeah, that is why this is late, and I'm sorry that it'll have to be this way for the remaining of this semester, which is up until the beginning of June. So yeah, you'll have to bear with me, but I can't change anything because my classes are a little bit more important than this. Really sorry about that. But yeah, let's get actually into the review. Also, if you watch my Haikyuu video, I'll explain the exact same thing there, so yeah. But the chapter, it was mainly like 99% focused on the villains. We had the meeting between Overhaul and Tamura's group, or Shigaraka's group, whatever you call him. And it gets really intense because we start off by getting like a little bit of lore about the whole Yakuza thing, because like Yakuza is like the Japanese mafia thingy. Of course it's a little different, I presume, in the Boku no Hero Academia universe, but basically you get a little bit more information about how things used to work before the rise of All Might, about how the underground was basically driven and ruled by all of these small or bigger Yakuza groups, and then you had All for One kind of in the center and everyone was scared of him, yet they all admire him and all that creepy stuff. But with the rise of All Might, all of those things were like systematically put down, and the whole system kind of just like disapparated, that's not the word I want to use, but it crackled and it's not what it used to be. But with the fall of All Might, these groups are now suddenly beginning, or the underground world is like rising again. We know that from the entirety of the arcs we've had, the two arcs we've had after the Community Ward arc, so we know that the villains are on the rise again and everything's just like chaos, which is also why the hero world is changing with the way that they are more focused on team heroes because they don't have a figure like All Might anymore. So basically Overhaul comes in and basically demands from Tamura, okay, so what is your plan now that All for One has fallen, like who will be in his stead? And Tamura's like, well, that's gonna be me, I'm gonna be the new ruler of the underworld. And Overhaul is like, okay, then what's your plan? How are we gonna get you to that point? And there's no answer, and Overhaul is like, okay, well, but I have a plan, and although I don't have the things that I require to make my plan work quite yet, I have a plan which will then mean that you will have to work under me, and I will become the ruler, and that starts the incredible scenes that follow with the fights and just a little bit of display of Overhaul's ability, which I really should have read up on because I don't know if we know too much about it, or if I don't know, but basically don't touch him is what I learned from this. Don't touch him, you'll die or explode or something, because a number of people try this and either explode or have parts of them explode, so that's super nice. But it does create a rift because it does show us, I think that this is super important, that even though there are groups of villains and there are there are minor villains like we saw in the initial chapters following the Camino War arc, with people just committing minor theft, such as stealing stuff in broad daylight, like normal crimes you'll see nowadays as well, like in our real world. And then you have these villain organizations, and more importantly the League of Villains, which, I mean, but it's important to see that we have the minor crimes because it's just easier to admit those crimes now that there's no symbol of peace anymore. And then you have not one, but you probably have a lot of different organizations that are more organized in the way that they not create but commit crimes. So we have our main villains, the League of Villains, and we have organizations such as Overhaul and his buddies, and probably others like smaller Yakuza groups and stuff like that, which is going to be real interesting because that means, of course, that we don't only have one enemy, we have a lot. And that's a lot more chaotic to take care of than if you just have one villain you want to go after. It's not just one organization that you need to dispatch and take care of, it's like all of these minor things as well. Because just taking care of the biggest one, or the one that you know of, that won't solve the overall problem of having crimes being committed in broad daylight, or crimes that are really life-changing for some people. So it's really interesting, and it's also just interesting to see that these organizations, of course, don't really get along, because if you have two people like Overhaul and Tamura both fighting to become this leader of the underworld, the biggest threat you'll see of criminals, you'll have internal fights within that criminal or these criminal organizations, and while that will help the heroes like identify them and just weaken them in general, it also might cause chaos, because if it comes down to a big war, an all-out war between these two crime organizations, they don't have any regards for human lives, civilian lives. Unlike with Heroes, where in the Camino War arc they were pretty quick to say, okay, we need to evacuate these areas because we know the villains are here, so get all civilians out. Like, the villain organizations who end up fighting each other won't have this problem. They won't say, okay, there are civilians here, let's get them out first, or let's fight in an open field. No, they will just kill everyone who is in their way. So that's probably gonna be a big problem. Probably, I don't know, I'm just like mentioning possibilities here. But overall, it was really nice to have more villain stuff and have more conflicts with them as well, so it's not just them pushing and pulling our protagonists, but also just other characters as well. I think that's really interesting. But by the end we have Mirio and Deku meeting with All Might and about to have a conversation, possibly about, maybe not about One for All, but maybe just a talk about becoming that great hero, because Mirio is, as said in a few chapters ago, and as I've said a couple times, the closest to becoming that #1 hero, and was also one of the one person that the UA wanted to inherit All Might's power, but Deku ended up having it as well, which is why he's now on the rise to becoming that #1 hero, which we know he will get to because of the first chapter. So yeah. It's gonna be really interesting to see what All Might has to tell them, because it's probably gonna be something about responsibility and just their role in the world, but I have a feeling that he's probably gonna tell them some pretty wicked, necessary information about something. I hope we get a little bit more lore and backstory, because I'm really interested in just in general more about All Might's past, the previous users of One for All, and just more about All for One and all those things. So I hope we get a little more information. Because I really live for backstories when it comes to like the overall universe of fictional stories. So yeah, I think I'm gonna end my review here. Hopefully I said something interesting, and if I did, you can leave a like, and you can comment below what you thought of this chapter, and you can subscribe if you want to see more, and until next time, bye!